Rinsing abused victims with holy water and making one boy pose as Jesus, grand jury reveals the depravity of 300 Pennsylvania priests who defiled 1,000 children, and the Catholic Church covered it up. Hundreds of Roman Catholic priests in Pennsylvania have molested more than 1,000 children, and senior church officials, including the Archbishop of Washington, D.C., systematically covered up the abuse. A grand jury report released Tuesday reveals the horrific predatory behavior, which included making young boys rinse their mouths with holy water to purify them after they were forced to give oral sex to clergymen, and one boy who was made to pose naked as Jesus while other priests took pornographic pictures. The report refers to 6 different dioceses where children were raped, plied with alcohol, or forced to perform for priests to produce pornographic material since the 1940s. Cardinal Donald Wuerl, the former longtime bishop of Pittsburgh who now leads the Washington Archdiocese, was among the high-ranking clergy who turned a blind eye to the abuse. The real number of abused children might be in the thousands, since some secret church records were lost and victims were afraid to come forward, the grand jury said. Most of the victims are boys, but some girls are also included. According to the report, church leaders covered the abusive acts up by claiming priests or clergymen were playing around or wrestling with the children. Priests were raping little boys and girls, and the men of God who were responsible for them not only did nothing, they hid it all, Attorney General Josh Shapiro said at a news conference in Harrisburg. The 800-page report said more than 300 clergy committed the abuse over a period decades, beginning in the mid-1950s. One cleric, the Reverend David A. Sutherland, was alleged to have had sex with at least 3 young boys beginning in the early 1980s. The Allentown Diocese, where he ministered, knew of the allegations but did not report them to authorities. Opening bracket H closing bracket U was an altar boy, 7th grade, and David had a trailer which he kept at the Appalachian Trail sites in Charlottesville, brought him there almost weekly, over a period of about 5 years, where they engaged in sexual acts, one of Sutherland's alleged victims told church officials in 1997. The victim said he was not a willing participant, but David threatened to harm or kill him. David also took pictures of the victim engaged in sexual acts and threatened to use them to embarrass him. Another young girl was raped by a number of priests who later told her that this was God's way of showing love, according to Lahiva Aliev. Calm. A priest in Scranton sexually assaulted an underage girl, impregnated her in the process, and then arranged for her to have an abortion, the grand jury report states. During the news conference in Harrisburg on Tuesday, Shapiro said that one priest had molested 5 sisters in one family. The diocese settled with the family after requiring a confidentiality agreement, he said. The Attorney General said that Catholic bishops covered up child sexual abuse by priests and reassigned them repeatedly to different parishes. They allowed priests to remain active for as long as 40 years, he said. Describing the weaponization of faith to silence victims, Shapiro cited several examples, including one priest who allegedly told children how Mary had to lick Jesus clean after he was born to groom them for oral sex. Children were taught that this abuse was not only normal but that it was holy, Shapiro said. Shapiro mentioned the story of Father Edward Graff. During his 35-year stint at the Allentown Diocese, Graff raped scores of young boys, according to the Attorney General. One of his victims, Joey, was so violently raped when he was 7 years old that he suffered injuries to his spine. Joey became addicted to pain medication and eventually overdosed and died. Before his death, Joey wrote a letter to the Allentown Diocese. In a letter, Joey said Graff killed his potential and the man he could have become. The abuse did happen. The grand jurors believe Joey, Shapiro said to Joey's mother, who is sitting on the stage Tuesday. But because so many of the priests are now dead or their alleged crimes falls outside the statute of limitations, only 2 have been charged as a result of the investigation. They are John Thomas Sweeney, who pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting a 10-year-old boy in July. In 1992, he made the fourth grader perform oral sex on him. The other priest is David Powelson. He was charged in May with indecently assaulting two boys over the course of several years. One was 8 and the other was 15 when he allegedly began abusing them. As part of the investigation, records from the Diocese of Allentown, Erie, Greensburg, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh and Scranton were analyzed. Combined, the diocese serviced more than half of Pennsylvania's 3.2 million Catholic residents. Shapiro said the 2-year probe found a systematic cover-up by senior church officials in Pennsylvania and at the Vatican. Today, Pennsylvanians can learn the extent of sexual abuse in the diocese, and for the first time we can begin to understand the systematic cover-up by church leaders that followed, he said. The cover-up was sophisticated. And all the while, shockingly, church leadership kept records of the abuse and the cover-up. These documents, from the diocese's own secret archives, formed the backbone of this investigation, he said at a news conference in Harrisburg. The abuse ranged from groping and masturbation to anal, oral and vaginal rape. Church officials routinely and purposefully described the abuse as horseplay and wrestling and inappropriate conduct. It was none of those things. It was child sexual abuse, including rape, Shapiro said. The panel concluded that a succession of Catholic bishops and other diocesan leaders tried to shield the church from bad publicity and financial liability by covering up abuse, failing to report accused clergy to police, and discouraging victims from going to law enforcement. Yet the grand jury's work won't result in justice for the vast majority of those who say they were molested by priests as children. While the probe yielded charges against 2 clergymen, including a priest who has since pleaded guilty, and another who allegedly forced his accuser to say confession after each sex assault, the other priests identified as perpetrators are either dead or will avoid arrest because their alleged crimes are too old to prosecute under state law. We are sick over other crimes that will go unpunished and uncompensated, the grand jury said. The document comes at a time of renewed scrutiny and fresh scandal at the highest levels of the U.S. Catholic Church. Pope Francis stripped 88-year-old Cardinal Theodore McCarrick of his title and ordered him to a lifetime of prayer and penance amid allegations that McCarrick had for years sexually abused boys and had sexual misconduct with adult seminarians. Among those criticized in the report is Cardinal Donald Wuerl, the former longtime bishop of Pittsburgh who now leads the Washington Archdiocese, for what it said was his part in the concealment of clergy sexual abuse. Wuerl, one of the highest-profile cardinals in the United States, released a statement Tuesday that said he had acted with diligence, with concern for the victims and to prevent future acts of abuse. He said ahead of the report's release that he expected to be criticized in it. The state Supreme Court had set a Tuesday deadline to publicly release a redacted version of the roughly 900-page report. Some current and former clergy named in the report went to court to prevent its release, arguing it violated their constitutional rights to reputation and due process of law. The state Supreme Court said the public had a right to see it, but ruled the names of priests and others who objected to the findings would be blacked out pending a September hearing on their claims. The High Court says it will consider their claims in September, but in the meantime ordered the report released with the identities of those clergy members concealed. Shapiro said he wants an unredacted report to be issued. Let me be very clear, my office is not satisfied with the release of a redacted report. Every redaction represents an incomplete story of abuse that deserves to be told, he said. A number of senior clergy reacted on Tuesday, expressing sorrow and regret over the alleged abuse. Bishop Lawrence T. Persico, the head of the diocese in Erie, gave a statement on Tuesday after the release of the grand jury's report. I want to express my sorrow and apologize to the victims of sexual abuse that occurred in the Diocese of Erie, he told WHP-TV in Harrisburg. Persico said that the diocese was committed to a policy of transparency. He said the diocese would release the names of priests who have been credibly accused of abuse. The bishop pledged to turn over all relevant information to law enforcement. Parysko also said that the diocese would offer financial help to those seeking counseling. I pledge the following to the victims: the Diocese of Erie will not shroud abusers in secrecy no matter who they are or how long ago the abuse has occurred, said Parysko. We have much work to do to build trust where leaders have failed. It is noteworthy that Parysko was the only bishop who was cited by Shapiro for praise for his handling of the grand jury report. His response to the crisis gives me some hope, Shapiro said of Parysko. He was the only one to testify to the grand jury in person. Parysko said on Tuesday that he did not testify to win the praise of the state attorney general. We did what we did because we have to move forward, and it was the right thing to do, the bishop said. The grand jury report names 41 priests who served in the Erie diocese and who are alleged to have committed a number of sex crimes, including fondling genitals and penetrating the mouths of both young boys and girls, according to PenLive.com. According to the grand jury, one priest who served in the diocese, Father Chester Gawronski, fondled boys and told them he was giving them a cancer check. Even though senior diocese officials knew of the allegations, they allowed the alleged offending priest to continue to minister, the grand jury says. Senior diocese officials, including bishops, often dissuaded victims from reporting abuse to police, pressured law enforcement to terminate or avoid an investigation, or conducted their own deficient, biased investigating without reporting crimes against children to the proper authorities.